you've seen, we had some good numbers again this month on job creation. This bill, developed by Councilman Alan Dom and his staff, will help us do just that. By commissioning a thorough analysis of our existing incentive programs and those employed by other cities, the Commerce Department will be empowered to make improvements to our recruitment strategies. Ultimately, this will make us a more competitive city. And I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Councilman Dom, who introduced the legislation, for a few words.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also want to recognize Councilman Greenlee, who's a co-sponsor of the bill, and also Council President Clark. I'm extremely proud of this legislation the mayor is signing today, and thank him officially for signing this bill, as well as the administration's work, my staff, and the cooperation from everyone, including the Commerce Department, to get this bill done. Also want to thank, again, Council President Clark and Councilman Greenlee for co-sponsoring this business-friendly legislation, and all my colleagues for their support. As a city government, we have a principal duty to the taxpayers to effectively manage and maximize their tax dollars. This legislation will help us accomplish this objective and will require the city to regularly evaluate our existing tax exemptions and incentives and measure the impact of these programs so as to ensure that they are fully supporting the city's economic development goals and ultimately improving Philadelphia's global competitiveness. We have the responsibility of improving the overall well-being of everyone who lives in, works in, and does business in or visits Philadelphia, and I believe this legislation can help produce better outcomes. Basically, the goal of this bill is to analyze our return on our investment in these different incentives and to, in a positive way, and determine how to make each one better than it is today, with the goal to expand the city's tax-paying base. I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues on City Council, the Mayor, and the administration to make Philadelphia the effective and efficient government our taxpayers expect and deserve. And with that, I'd like to ask Councilman Greenlee if he'd like to say a few words. No?
I'm here to support you, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess we can get right to the signing. Thank you.
Need a higher chair. I feel like I'm in a hole. I feel like I'm in a hole. Yep. Okay. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Cheryl. Thank you. Okay. Great. Any questions?
Yeah, this is probably not for the comms director. Is this the analysis already required for the GASB 77 statement that's supposed to be in the next year's CAFR?
Repeat the question, please.
Is the analysis of all the tax incentives, isn't that going to be required now for the GASB, the government accounting standards 77?
I am not sure to the answer to that.
I know a little bit. I think
Yes, we'll leave that to the tax people. It's called stay in your lane.
Yes, the GASB 77 requirements have a lot of reporting requirements around tax expenditures. They're defined in some ways. This legislation mirrors that in some ways, but also goes beyond and looks for, GASB 77 is more of the what. This legislation is going to take us to the so what and help us figure out what next.
On this, one of the things a lot of people talk about is paying your tax abatement.
Yes.
Whether the city should continue to ask for your tax abatement.
Yes.
Mayor, do you think it's time for the city to pay your tax abatement?
No.
Why?
Because they're effective. And they have basically created most, if not all, of the residential and commercial development that we've seen in many neighborhoods across the city. As a matter of fact, some, and we've had this conversation with council members, including Councilman Dom, that some neighborhoods may need even more than 10 years to incentivize. We have a increasingly, well, we have hopefully a decreasingly poor city, but we have a large number of poor people, and we need to incentivize wealthy people to live in the city because they can live in Radnor, they can live in Voorhees, they can live wherever they want, and if they buy a $9 million condo and the transfer tax is, I think the transfer tax on one of the condos that we just topped off was $528,000 just in the transfer tax. You have to sadly incentivize people at this point still to construct in the city. And it's been very effective. Every study that's been done of it from many different angles conclude that it is a very effective tool, and it's one of Frank DeCicco's real legacies.
How about people who complain that that's money that the school district needs?
You're assuming that construction project gets done in the first place, which means if it doesn't get done, and you have an empty lot that you're paying taxes on, but there's very little tax incentive. And remember, the tax abatement is so old now that things are coming off, multiple properties are coming off every single year. Don't forget, however, that person who can afford the $9 million condo is also spending money in the city. They're eating in the city. They're shopping in the city. And these are things we wouldn't have. And I recognize it's very difficult to explain to a long-term resident why that's the case. But until we have an economy that carries itself, we're going to have to incent people to live in the city and pay taxes in the city and the like.
But these people that are actually coming in the city, getting this tax abatement, they're also availing themselves of our school districts and our roads.
Not necessarily. I mean, a lot of these people are empty nesters. They don't have children in the schools. I mean, we had this, and Alan gave me this example years ago when we were having this discussion. Chase Utley, who used to play for the Phillies, all right, bought a how many $1 million condo? $4 or $5 million condo in Center City. 2 years of his wage taxes paid for the abatement. The abatement was already paid for in 2 years of his wage taxes. So it's, it is a trade-off, no doubt about it. And I know that people will continue to make the argument that it should end. And if you want to add anything, that's fine, because he's in that business too.
I want to share with the mayor some statistics about this that just came out. 2.8% of all abated homes are over $1 million. 67% are under 400,000, and 25% of the abated homes are workforce housing. And by the way, as the mayor said, in 2026, new revenue to the city is $170 million, of which 55% will go to the school district, 45% comes to the general fund. But the really interesting statistic is in the surrounding suburbs since 1999, when Frank DeCicco, Councilman DeCicco, put this bill in place, from 1999 to today, housing starts in the suburbs 11% up. City of Philadelphia, 376% up. I think that speaks for itself.
Can we ask you an unrelated question?
Yeah.
Will you be signing the electric vehicle moratorium?
Did council pass it unanimously? Probably, yes. I mean, sadly, yes. I mean, if that's the will of council. It was my bill. I recognize the problems associated with parking, and hopefully we can continue to improve our mass transit and regional rail and other things so people don't have to worry about depending on a car as much as they do. It's a moratorium. It's not an end. And I recognize that the will of council when it's 17-0, signing it. What, 11-6? I'm sorry.
I didn't hear you say unanimous.
I thought it was unanimously. 11-6. Well, I'll talk to the sponsor. I mean, we can give it a shot to ease it for a while till we figure out a real solution to it. Yeah.
Can I ask you about the Chambers lawsuit?
Yeah. What about it? I mean, I wish they wouldn't sue us. We do. I mean, Councilman Greenlee's here. He's the sponsor of the bill. It was not my initiative, but that did pass unanimously, I believe, or no?
Yes, sir.
That did pass unanimously. So, doing anything other than signing it would have made much sense. Plus, women's pay equity is an issue in this country. I mean, 79 cents on the dollar is what they're paid compared to a similar job for a man. I mean, and unless I don't think this was a big onerous burden. I'm not going to get into the litigation because now we're in court. But we didn't feel that it was a big onerous burden, and frankly, the chamber didn't express all that heavy opposition to it when the bill was moving through council. So I don't understand the motivation, but we'll certainly we'll defend it in court because that's council's 17-0 vote indicated support in council and support in the community for at least. Look, if you can't ask someone what they made in their last job, but you ask them what they want to make in the new job, it's kind of the same answer for what I'm able to figure out. But they see things differently, and we'll see how it goes. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Mr. Mayor, you served in terms on city council.
6.
Council rules require that any city agency with a budget
Right.
of $5 million or more come in and present testimony to answer questions. The only thing that doesn't get them to do that is council's own
Right.
budget. $17 million proposed for the next fiscal year. Do you think that they should have a dedicated budget hearing where somebody presents testimony about how that money is going to be spent
Yeah.
ask any questions?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that council's a independently elected body, independently elected on their own. They're independent officials who represent districts and that represent the city. I think transparency is always the best policy, but it's up to them and it's their prerogative to not or to have it or not have it. And I have no authority or ability to force them into it or to have a big fight over it. I mean, it's up to the public. If the public feels differently, then the public will contact. They're very good at contacting their elected officials, and if their public's upset about it, I'm sure council will hear about it, and they'll make whatever adjustment they need to make. But I mean, it's not within my jurisdiction to tell them to have a hearing.
Will you have supported such a thing when you were on council?
Yeah.
Mayor, the residents in the Arkansas area are already upset about the restrictions that
Right.
are being put into the employment.
Right.
What would you say to them?
I would say to them, I appreciate their concern, and I would also appreciate their patience. In order for us to have these type of national and international events, there is inconvenience. We're trying to limit the inconvenience as best we can. This is not going to be to the level of the Pope with a traffic box and all those other things. I recognize that the people who live on the Parkway or around the Parkway are inconvenienced more than others, but we need to get. You know, the value of this kind of exposure for the city is priceless, and the NFL wanted it there. The only reason that it came here, they were only coming here if it was going to be on the Parkway with the Rocky Steps as the backdrop. They didn't want to look at any other site, and we thought it was with 200,000 people coming over 3 days, free events for families, and the ability to have this kind of event in Philadelphia and to show off our city and our skyline and our amenities and everything else is just stuff we couldn't afford to pay for by advertising. And I recognize people are inconvenienced by, you know, the Mummers Parade and by other events, and I do sympathize, and we'll try to work with them as best we can, but we need to have, you know, this kind of exposure for the city nationally and internationally.
According to ESPN, they're looking at possibly moving the NFL draft to Dallas next year. All of Philadelphia.
No, I think this is a two-year, a one-year arrangement
1 year possible.
and one option. Yeah.
An option.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess what is the city doing to try to make it, you know, kind of make the whole NFL draft offer Philadelphia that they can't?
By
It's totally unrelated.
Well, let me finish that way. In order to get them back the year after, we have to do the best event we can this year. So that's our goal, is to make it such a, you know, fantastic event that they'll want to not consider another city. But we'll see how we're going to do our best to put, you know, it's hard because, you know, on one hand, if we didn't attract any of these events, people would say, oh, you're a boring city and blah, you know, and now we attract them and people have, you know, criticism. That's understandable considering the inconvenience, but it's inconvenience for 3 days. It's not 2 million people, it's 200,000 people, and it'll be over, and we can then take all the benefit of all that free publicity. And what was the unrelated question?
My other question concerns the Welcome America concert.
Yes.
I know that any day now you're going to be announcing who's going to be performing on the Parkway, some of the other details of Welcome America. Last year was kind of a lackluster year for the concert.
Well, first of all, it rained, number one. That was the problem, and people stayed away.
Even without the rain, the lineup
Oh,
was not enough to get people out there.
I thought the lineup was fantastic. I think the Sound of Philadelphia is a signature sound of Philadelphia. Gamble and Huff are extremely well-known composers who had literally scores and scores of hits. And I think the people, I was there, and the people who were out there are having a ball. And
To be frank, sir, they're old.
so what? I'm old. I resemble that remark.
And I'm old too, but, you
Yeah.
know, the question I have.
Old people have a place in the world.
No, I have no problem with that, but the question is, you know, prior to last year's Welcome America, it was seen as a more, I guess, a fresher event.
Well, I've heard criticism about that event too, and I was watching it on television and I couldn't hear the songs because all the F-bombs were being bleeped out. So that was a source of complaint for people who felt that they couldn't take their grandchildren or their children to the event because of the language and the songs, which doesn't offend me, but it's not a thing you can watch on television because it's, you know, every third word is a beep. So it was hard.
I mean, is anybody thought about how they're going to balance this out between content you can't necessarily put on television and content that puts like a significant part
I wasn't sleeping. I don't know where you were, but I was dancing, and I don't dance a lot, so I was actually enjoying myself. That music is, and maybe it's selfish on my part because it's the music of my life. It's my 70s life experience, and there are a lot of people out there who were really having a good time. And as a matter of fact, some of my younger staff were a little concerned about the same thing you were, and they were dancing when I saw them out on the Parkway. So we will not have the same lineup that we had last year. We will have a different lineup, and we're waiting to see who responds. We're limited in the amount of money we can spend, and we're also limited in who's in the area at the time. Because it's the 4th of July, folks are in doing concerts in Atlantic City, doing concerts at Wells Fargo, so whoever happens to be in the region are basically our pool of potential acts. But as far as we're also limited in our ability to, I mean, I would love to, pay for Gaga, but I don't think we could afford her. So sorry you had a bad time. I hope you have a good time this year. Okay? Good, thank you.